So you found a source, a really great source, and you want to cite it in your oral presentation. How do you go about doing that? I suggest including 3 pieces of information about each source. And what those 3 pieces of information are depends on the source that you're using and the information that will best help support your argument. The point of giving an oral citation is to let the audience know where you're getting your information from, to give them the information that they need to go out and find that source or that piece of information that you found, and to help them determine whether or not that information you're providing is credible. So with those 3 things in mind, there are a variety of different pieces of information that we can present. We could tell them the title of the source that you found. We could tell them the date it was published, the author who published it, something about the credentials of the author who published it, the publishing organization, something about the credentials of the publishing organization. What does citing an academic journal article sound like in practice? Well, you could say something like this. Dr. Bailey Benedict, an assistant professor of management at California State San Bernardino, conducted research on employees who are fired in the workplace and how that firing is communicated with remaining employees. She found that 41% of remaining employees in the organization found out that their coworker was fired from another coworker. How could that same piece of information and that same citation be provided in a different way? Well, we could say something like this. In an academic journal article published in Management Communication Quarterly in 2012, Dr. Bailey Benedict found that 41% of employees who find out that a coworker was fired from their organization learned about that coworker being fired from another coworker. Maybe you want to provide the same information, but to an audience that might not be familiar with academic research. You could say something like this. A professor at California State University, San Bernardino, conducted research on employees who learn about a coworker being fired in the organization. She wrote that research up and got it published in a journal after it was reviewed by other experts in her field. She found that 41% of employees who learn that their coworker was fired learn about that coworker being fired from another coworker. Now, academic journal articles can sometimes be a little bit easier to present that information because it's all usually there, and you can find out whether or not the article is credible by looking at who the author is and the kind of research that they do. However, if you're citing something like a website, it can be a little harder. Sometimes the date that the website was updated isn't there. Sometimes there's not an author. So we have to get a little bit creative with the kinds of information that we share. Let's first start by looking at an article that was posted on a website, a news organization's website. I found this article about the impact of COVID on workplace conflict, and it comes from Forbes, which we know is a reputable business news organization. But what we don't know is who this Anna Shields is. Well, if we click on her name here, we can scroll through the kinds of writing and contributions, that she's been giving at Forbes. She has been writing in this area for over a year, since August 4th, 2020. So that's the kind of information that we can use to help build credibility about this author. If we were going to cite this article, we could say something like, in an article published in Forbes Online, author Anna Shields, who's been researching conflict in the workplace for over a year, explained how that's a kind of citation that we could give about Anna. We could also say something like, in an article published on Forbes Online called The Impact of COVID on Workplace Conflict, the author Anna Shields writes about how COVID has prompted people to bring up more of their concerns in the organization, be that to their teams or to their managers, which can be a source of conflict. Last but not least, you want to cite a website. So it's kind of an article, but there's not an author, and it comes from an organization, but we don't know from who exactly. Let's figure out how we can deal with this. It's a scientific and professional organization that represents psychology folks in the United States with tons of researchers and clinicians and things like that. Let's say that we want to cite this, but we don't have an author to cite. Well, we could say, according to the American Psychological Association, which is an organization that represents 122,000 psychologists and practitioners in the area of psychology in the United States, they say that if you're experiencing stress at work, you might consider making a list of your stressors. What was that stressor and how did you react to it to help you figure out how you can better deal with stress in the workplace? That's one way that we could cite this organization. We could also cite this organization by saying, or this website by saying, according to the website from the American Psychological Association, which represents the field of psychology in the United States, in 2018, they said that if we want to figure out how to deal with our stress at work better, we should make a list of our stressors. What was the thing that brought us stress? And how did we react to it to figure out how we can better identify our stressors and react to them in more positive and constructive ways. All right, to summarize, if you're giving an oral citation and a presentation, we ideally want to give 3 pieces of information about the source. None of this according to Wikipedia stuff. We're going to say something about the title, maybe the date, maybe the author or a piece of their credentials or credibility, maybe the publishing organization and a piece of their credentials or credibility. You can get creative with the kind of information that you present, but we want to make sure the audience feels comfortable with the source that we're presenting and knows that we didn't just make it up or find something random that's not credible on the internet.